Hello, welcome to Feedback episode number 26. Today we are joined by saxophonist and composer Travis Laplante along with John Schaefer, and we'll be speaking with them today about Travis's album-length work for us, Inner Garden. It was just released in October on the New Amsterdam record label. Don't forget, you can always send questions ahead of time to feedback@yarnwire.org or join the live chat on YouTube or Facebook to submit your questions in real time. So yeah, we're really excited that you're both available to chat with us today. And with that, I'll hand it over to you, John.
All right, thanks, Ian. And I'm not sure what's more psychedelic, my Yayoi Kusama fake background or that opening that you guys have for this series. Pretty cool stuff.
Yeah.
As is Inner Garden, the work, Travis, that you've written for Yarnwire. We know that you have some familiarity with writing for drums. I mean, you have the duo with Gerald Cleaver, for example, and a lot of people watching this will be familiar with your pieces for Battle Trance. How much of a stretch was it to write for an ensemble with such a specific and unusual instrumentation?
That's a very good question. First of all, I just want to say I'm so happy to be here with everyone, and was especially excited to hear that, John, that you would be joining us for this. So I just wanted to say that. It's so nice to be here.
Thanks.
Yeah. Well,
all right, you've dilly-dallied long enough. Answer the damn question.
So, in a certain sense, it was the opposite of a stretch, and was one of the more effortless endeavors I've had musically, and I will admit that I had a period at the beginning, once I was invited to work with Yarnwire, that I did feel the sense of overwhelm and of, being out of my comfort zone and all these different kind of internal fears that were not real. And once I really kind of settled my mind and just felt, and really remembered all of the performances that I've witnessed from Yarnwire, and also the bit that I knew of them as people and friends, I was just really excited to connect and to embrace the fact that everyone in Yarnwire is a phenomenal musician and is they are the deepest, some of the deepest listeners that I've ever worked with. And I knew that I wasn't going to approach it in a traditional composer ensemble paradigm where I bring in some kind of finished score and say, okay, everyone, this is exactly what everyone's doing. There's no freedom. It's all controlled. That is not what I wanted to do. And I wanted to really embrace the fact that I am an improviser, and I know that everyone in Yarnwire is so open and is open to incorporating improvisational elements into the music. So it was actually not a stretch, and was just so organic and fun.
Well, what was your brief? Was it write a piece for Yarnwire, or was it write a piece for you and Yarnwire?
I think Russell, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I know that Yarnwire had a week at the Stone and they had an evening, and I think you asked to do something kind of with me. I think.
Yeah, I think that was the idea. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
So Russell, the idea of a repertoire of works for two pianos and two percussion, that wasn't obscure enough for you. Now it's going to be improvising sax player, two pianos, two percussionists.
Yeah, it's funny because you're right. Like, there's that whole history of repertoire for the ensemble, but as we got going in our trajectory, it turned out that we were commissioning and writing, or having people write things for us. So we were generating material, and it got to the point where we were working with our friends across various genres and of all different kinds, and it was almost like, when is a collaboration with Travis going to happen? It was like you could see it on the distance, and then it did.
Well, I want to get a little more into the piece, but first I want to give people a chance to hear towards the beginning of Inner Garden, which is in 3 parts. Not the first time, Travis, that you've written a piece in 3 parts, but the opening is this kind of magical, shimmery, twilit passage that sounds composed. What is actually happening here?
So at the beginning, well, as a matter of fact, the majority of the first section, everyone in Yarnwire is working with kind of a combination of modal material and I think I would refer to it as cellular patterns with a few repetitive notes that are operating in a specific way with shifting tonality. But I think what I think is especially potent about the beginning is we really spent a decent amount of time figuring out what the instrumentation and the timbre is. And I really had this vision of a sound that to me was so gentle, but also where I could feel literally like every color in existence and this kind of all-encompassing quality to it. And I really wanted to work with pitched percussion, i.e. either marimba or vibraphone. And I remember getting together with Russell and Ian, and we tried to really see what it would sound like. And I was originally thinking, oh, maybe marimba. And we tried it on marimba and we're just like, no. and vibraphone, it was like within 2 seconds, we knew that that was it. And it was perfect. So.
Yeah, and that does give it that kind of shimmer, whereas a blocky, woody marimba sound would have been, well, quite a different sound. But let's hear some of the opening of part 1 of Travis's piece called Inner Garden. just a bit of the opening movement of Inner Garden, written by Travis Laplante for the quartet Yarn Wire. And Laura Ning, as the two pianists, you're in this kind of modal, repeating these little cells, as Travis referred to it, for quite a long time. How do I mean? Is it as steady state as it sounds, or are you actually getting a chance to like use different, move your hands, use different fingering? I mean, it just sounds like repetitive stress syndrome waiting to happen when you're listening to that.
Actually, I'm really just surprised to see that score, Travis, because like I think when Laura and I play that, it's so fluid. If at least it feels very fluid, feels natural. It feels like there's no limit, even though there's a very like modal limit of notes to us. But the way of playing is like just like tossing sort of marbles in my hands, and then just sort of have those notes and just go back and forth. There's no tendonitis related injuries, I assure you. But I actually looking at the scores, like, oh yeah, those were the notes I'm probably juggling. But I feel like Laura and I had sometimes just it's not like all even. Sometimes some notes pop out, and then we would focus on another note, and then change colors, change like very subtle dynamics to it to make it. I don't know, just like how we react to everybody else.
Yeah. Travis used the word color as well in introducing that excerpt, and wanting to hear all of the colors in one piece of music. Travis, do you have? I mean, is synesthesia a part of your creative process? Do you hear different tonal centers as having colors?
Not, no. The short answer is no. However, I am starting to, I think, work a little bit more with image and just feeling a particular image or gesture or place, even like a location, and then feeling drawn to translate my experience of either being in this place or being with this image to sound. So yeah, not working with a literal color, but more, I would say, for instance, in this beginning part, I did have the kind of picture of like those beautiful those mandalas that just incorporate, like, just that have like the most gorgeous color and are just, you look at them and it's just like spinning. And so there was something of that was in my consciousness when we were working on this.
And the title of the piece, Inner Garden, you're speaking of, creating a place and setting it to music. What was the image? What was the idea behind that title?
Yeah, I know everyone in Yarnwire has heard this before, so my apologies for being redundant.
No.
Try to
loved
keep
it.
it quick. But yeah, so just after receiving the email from Russell inviting me to write a piece, I just had this little glimpse. It was so short, but it was so clear. And in this glimpse, it was the five of us just falling down just towards the center of the earth. And I was expecting us to, run into metal or lava or something that I had learned in school about what was, in the center of the earth. But we arrived in this just like the most beautiful garden that I've ever experienced. And it was just as if everything was completely saturated with love. And it was like the air was just like every breath was like drinking a pure glass of water, and as if like every flower was just calling our real names. And it was this just beautiful, unbelievable experience. And there was something about that it felt like, wow, I was really shown or reminded what the earth really is, or what is at the core of the earth's being. And along with that feeling of joy, I also did feel the sorrow of how I've forgotten so much. And so I feel like kind of holding those two distinct emotions next to each other and creating a musical form that for me is reminiscent of this experience of falling to a center of beauty was really the inspiration for kind of the arc of the piece. And it's not meant to be, interpreted literally. And one of the things I love about music is it's so mysterious, and we all have our own experiences with it. And I would not want to take that away from anybody, but that was part of the real inspiration.
Well, and as we'll hear, even in these excerpts, as we go through the various movements and the overarching piece itself, there is, each of the three movements has its own kind of emotional tenor. Mm-hmm. And this first movement, it has this very, as I said before, kind of magical sounding beginning, and then at some point the harmonies start wandering, and So Laura, I mean, Ning was talking before about, you're playing with these marbles and stuff, and then about halfway through the movement, you have a whole new set of marbles, or you have all the marbles. And I mean, it really does seem like, things start drifting and wavering about halfway through.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is, I think, we have this knowledge that that's the trajectory of the piece. And so it's interesting, when we perform it live, to see sort of how we get there, because it's so different, this type of playing. It's like, it really, I mean, for classically trained musicians, I think a lot of us either lost this feeling in our playing, or maybe never learned how to play this way, where it's just this pure experience of hearing what's happening and how your instrument feels to you, rather than what you're reading on a score on the page. And so that kind of transformation for me in a piece like this, with that kind of playing, is something that's like, it's very exciting. So I have to sort of tamp down my excitement, because I know it's coming, and just like listen and let it unfold naturally.
Well, let's hear how it unfolds. We're about halfway through movement one in this excerpt from Travis's piece called Inner Garden. Now, Travis, I have to ask you, people watching this are seeing a printed score that is pretty faithful to what we're hearing. In a complete reversal of the normal compositional process, that score came after the performance, right? After you actually worked the piece out with Yarn Wire.
Yeah, that's correct. And with most music I write, to be honest, the score usually does come after. And to be honest, like the real purpose of the score is for us to, I think, remember kind of what we're doing, and to also just there is something about the document that I think is beautiful and it does have value, but it is mostly for that purpose. It really is like a document of what we did, and then could potentially open up a conversation if in the future there are other musicians who are interested in connecting with it. Then there would be a point of connection there. But it's definitely it's definitely not like the most essential version of the music.
Right. And each of the three parts of Inner Garden seems to follow the same kind of trajectory. As I said before, each one has its own emotional space, but they tend to start softly, sparely, and build to a kind of eruption at the end of movement one, an almost Glenn Branca-ish wall of sound, and over the top this non-stop breathless saxophone going. And eventually some very kind of Pharoah Sanders style overblowing of the saxophone. I don't know if that's a touchstone for you, or.
Well, I love Pharoah Sanders for sure. I have deep respect for him and listen, I mean, John Coltrane was the most influential musician to me as a young person, and that includes his later work with Pharoah Sanders. So that was a part of my musical nourishment growing up, for sure.
Yeah. And as percussionists, Russell, Ian, at the end of the movement, when you finally get to like bang on drums and stuff, is there a little bit of catharsis in a movement like this?
I don't know when that was added, maybe later in the process. Am I remembering that correctly?
I think so. I think we wanted a little something to
a little something.
Well, I think it was we just maybe couldn't keep up with Travis and Laura and Ning. I mean, just the pianos are so massive, and we were just like,
and adding some low end there is just like the drop. It's just like boom.
Right.
Bass drop, yes. It's not quite EDM territory, but it does get to the same kind of ecstatic feeling that EDM aims for. All right, let's give the folks who are listening in and watching a chance to hear what we're talking about. This is how movement one of Inner Garden ends. rocking.
Yeah.
The best part about that is, you know, you've gone through this emotional and musical climax. You still have 2 more movements to go. Must be like, you know, the end of Act 1 of a Wagner opera is like totally draining. It's like, oh God, we have 2 more to go.
Yeah.
I mean, what is that like for the 4 of you?
Oh man, I remember, you know, when we get to this, Ian and I are opposite, right? And like we've kind of been playing probably harder than we normally do, like harder and faster, like on
Yeah.
vibes. And then we're like, all right, now we got to switch to drums, start banging away, listening to each other and volleying things. And then, you know, if I hear Ian getting faster, I'm like, okay, I got to match it. And I think we kind of like start pushing each other, not in
Yeah.
a competitive way, but just to like keep building sound. And I know I'm just waiting for us to stop. Like we're all pushing as hard as we can, and I think we stop when we have to. I think that's what it ends up with.
Yeah.
Because
luckily we get a break. Travis
Yes.
doesn't.
Yeah, I know.
Well, that's true because movement 2 begins with harmonics on the sax and Travis, a really subtle, soft collection of bowed percussion sounds. We were talking before about color, and of course, there are tone colors too, and you seem to have been very, very careful and, you know, very tellingly deploying all the tone color possibilities of this group. Do you work that out with the 4 members sort of as in early on in the process of composing, or how does that happen?
Yeah. So section 2, I knew that I had this very specific set of saxophone multiphonics that felt like that was kind of the starting place for the piece, and I had a clear feeling that I wanted to really explore bowed cymbals with those sounds, mostly based on the timbre and how the overtone series of cymbals and those saxophone multiphonics are both have similarities but are very distinct. But you know, one has these ideas and then you hope that they translate into reality, and sometimes they do and sometimes they don't, like the marimba idea. But yeah, I mean, it was so, I mean, yes, it was so purposeful, but then it was also so simple because Ian and Russell, like, I really didn't have to say anything to them. I was just like, okay, this is my part. Like, what are you guys hearing? I'm hearing, you know, bowed cymbals. And then they were very just masterful at kind of going through the different options of instruments that they had to work with and just really dialing in like, oh, like, I really love the way this cymbal sounds, you know, or like, and I think Ian was working with a bass drum as well. And so we really just got to a space very quickly. And it felt like we like refined everything like without much process.
Well, it's interesting to listen to because now we've just set it up, but if we hadn't done that, I think a lot of people might be hard pressed to identify what they were actually listening to, which is, you know, at this date in the 21st century when we think we've heard it all, this is a pretty neat trick to be able to pull off, especially to do it completely acoustically. Russell, you and Ian had, you know, your arsenal of metallic instruments that you had to choose from. Travis talks about the multiphonics on the sax and the harmonics of metal. Metal doesn't behave the way a column of air or a string behaves, right?
That's true.
Yeah.
It's full of all these irrational fractions, you know, so tuning becomes more conceptual than something you can actually control, right?
Absolutely. But, you know, Travis is so great at these multiphonics that over the course of our rehearsals, you know, like we got real familiar with the different pitches that he was getting. And so, I think I remember I was like, okay, when he was playing, he would extend them for a little bit. And what both Ian and I did was listen. And for my part, I heard little melodies. I heard specific pitches that were always kind of in there. And rather than go with like a full set of whatever, I chose 3 or 4 temple bowls and a crotale that I wanted. Symbol. Yeah. That's right. That I wanted to return to, and I kind of created a modular kind of melody out of that. And then I had a cymbal that I really like. It's a China crash cymbal, and something about the way his multiphonics worked, my cymbal could catch those, and so I had kind of a repertoire of pitches that I could access with my bow. Sometimes they would work and others wouldn't, but that was kind of the beauty of performance, is seeing what each space would activate. And the most magical times were when, for me at least as a performer, were when the cymbal was like having a good day and Travis was like on this high moment, and I was just like, oh man, this is awesome. Like I just wanted to stay on that pitch, and then it might change to a lower frequency and just alter the whole experience for me. And that was really so cool because as percussionists we don't get to really play sustained tones like in a real true fashion unless we're rolling or something, but the bow helped me access this kind of like air sound that Travis had while also generating new pitches that he hopefully heard and could play off of also. And I think it's similar for Ian's part on the tam-tam.
Yeah. Yep.
All right. Well, let's put the theory into practice here a little bit of the recording near the opening of movement 2 of Inner Garden. So that is early on in movement 2 of Inner Garden. And Russell, let me just come back to something you said sort of in passing, but I think it's an interesting point. You're talking about bowing the percussion, and sometimes the space really likes certain so these instruments will sound different from night to night depending on the place. I mean, place has an impact. I mean, for Laura and Ning, piano is a piano is a piano. I mean, they're, you take what you get. but you're bringing your own instruments and finding that they sound different night after night if you're touring through different places, right?
Yeah, and specifically the cymbal and tam tam. I think Ian's tam tam and my cymbal. And we haven't ever had to play this piece like on instruments that weren't ours, because I don't think we could fly with Ian's tam tam or my cymbal. So I'd be curious what a different instrument might do. But we did play this at Roulette and at the Stone. And then in the
very
recording
different
studio.
places.
Super different. And yeah, we had to get ourselves accustomed to the way our instruments reacted, not just chamber music as players, but our instruments themselves.
Yeah. Now, Travis, there's a startling moment about halfway through movement 2, and the most startling thing about it is that it's startling because it's the entrance of the most recorded instrument in history, the piano. You've set up this kind of tonal landscape, and it's full of sustained sounds. And when the piano comes in with its natural attack, it's, to me at least, the first time I heard it was like, whoa, what was that? Now, for Laura and Ning, that's got to be great, to have your instrument suddenly sound like this tank, bursting through the trees or something. Was that intentional on your part?
Well, I don't know. So maybe not, but maybe. So yeah, the piano parts for that, they came about. I was brainstorming kind of where I was living at the time. I was so lucky to have access to a real grand piano. And so I actually recorded some of my multiphonics and was just at the piano. And, I'm a beginning pianist. Like I am not just like able to go out into outer space with it. So it was interesting. I really loved the way these root position chords sounded, sustained with these really rich multiphonics. There was something about it where I could really feel the resonance of the piano, and there was this to me, very beautiful, like kind of like lyrical quality that started to come out. And it was like, again, I think what you're saying, John, like the fact that it was like so like basic in kind of conjunction with these more like far stretched sounds created this composite sound that I felt was very even more rich and fascinating than if I was trying to kind of mine the outer limits of the piano. So yeah, there was a simplicity to that part of the piece, and especially in the pianist parts. And they also keep, Laura and Ning keep coming back to, I think it's this D that keeps just kind of, it's like a middle D keeps coming.
But that's again, that's one of the great things about art, is when it can take something that has been done 1,000 times and find a new context in which to set it. And so when we hear this excerpt, you'll hear a kind of built up version of the opening texture, and then the entrance of the pianos from Inner Garden. movement 2 of Inner Garden, Travis, like all three movements of the piece, and like much of your music that we've heard over the years, this builds as it goes along. It builds, but it doesn't accelerate the way, say, movement 1 does. It remains, I was going to say placid. It's not placid. It seems more like a lament, a dirge. And to go back to what you were saying before about, this image of joy and sorrow, if those opening 2 movements have their own emotions to them, the shimmer leading to the ecstasy at the end of movement 1, this seems to be the quote unquote funeral march, your Chopin funeral march of this piece. Do you see this as a darker part of the work?
I suppose so. It to me feels like that middle place in a journey where you really just are questioning everything and you don't know if you're going to make it or if you're going to die. There's something about,
wow, what kind of journey do you take?
Yeah, across deserts,
Get in the car and drive upstate. Wonder if I'll live through that.
Yeah. But more on like a mythic journey per se.
Okay.
And then also just something like, again, if we're going back to that image of going through, descending into something that actually, this kind of slow breaking down of material in order to descend. I also feel that metaphor in this. But yeah, I think, and it's hard to say like what is dark and what is not dark these days, so.
Well,
yeah.
I'm curious, the 4 of you in the band, do you have these sorts of conversations with a composer when they bring you a piece? Did you have this sort of talk with Travis at any point in working, especially when a piece is built so collaboratively as this one is?
I think, yeah, I mean, I know we were very concerned about pacing and energy in this section, and just the kind of flow of material. I don't know if our conversations ever really entered the kind of metaphysical or narrative, but.
Okay. Well, you mentioned pacing, and you meant that in a sort of metaphorical musical way, but when we get to movement 3, there's literal pacing to be done here. I mean, this is a work where the staging is part of the score, because Ian, you and Russell have to move from, I guess all 4 of you do, don't you? You're all in motion. Laura and Ning, what are you doing at the very end of movement 2? You have to wedge something under the sustain pedal.
Oh, right. Yeah. So I think, because we talked a lot about how we wanted the sympathetic resonance of the strings. So when Travis is playing a lot of these incredibly rich multiphonics, it excites the piano strings. So it's sort of like this natural acoustic amplifier for what he's doing. And so, yeah, it's really the easiest way for anybody watching to fix down a piano pedal, if you ever have to do that, is to take a marker or a pencil.
Oh no, don't give our secret away. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, everybody thinks it has to be a brake drum, but that's actually difficult to do and work stuff. So you can just kind of wedge a pencil in there and it'll fix it down.
And so the pedal will stay down, the dampers will rise, and the whole piano becomes this kind of natural reverb thing. The late Lester Bowie did that back in the 80s. He played his trumpet into a piano with the sustain pedal, and whatever note the trumpet hit would be reflected literally in the air. So do those strings stay open and undampened throughout the 3rd movement? They do.
Yeah.
Okay. So in this piece, Travis, um, it seems like, to go back to the image of the garden, you've got lots of chimes happening, lots of playing of the saxophone where we hear the audible sound of you breathing through the instrument. It really seems like there's a kind of portrait of wind, of the movement of air, of nature at play here.
Yes, that is what I'm hoping for. And yeah, back to the garden metaphor. What I was hearing for that, the closest I could get to that particular feeling of love that I experienced in that, if you want to call it a dream, the closest I could get to that was the sound of these chimes. And I think that has to do with some experiences I've had in the past with wind chimes that have been just very kind of sacred experiences. So I really wanted to try getting basically as many wind chimes as possible that we can simultaneously sound and see what it sounds like. And so that was the basis for this idea. But then we also really started to experiment with, like, okay, like, rather than us just shaking the wind chimes all at the same time, like, how can we actually make this more compositional and kind of to draw the listener in even more? And for me as a saxophonist, it was actually very unlike anything I've ever done before, improvising with the wind chimes as they were being walked back and forth. So yeah, and I was just very pleased with the way it translated. And I would have had to return a lot of wind chimes if it didn't work.
And those things are not cheap.
Yeah.
All right, let's hear them in action. This is from pretty early on in movement 3 of Inner Garden. So Travis, this presents an interesting sort of compositional challenge, because each set of chimes you know the notes. You know, each set has its own set of 5 or 6 notes. So you know the general sound world that you're going to be in for that set of chimes, but the sets of chimes are constantly changing and they all have different tunings. I mean, that's part of the point of them. And sometimes they're in completely different tuning systems as well. So how did you make the decisions of, like, you know, I'll go with this set of chimes because they're pentatonic. I'm going to avoid that one because it's in a 11 note just intonation. You know, how do you make those decisions?
Yeah, I think it was pretty, honestly, it was a collaborative decision where I think we just kind of tried a bunch of different sequences of the chimes and are like, you know, this really feels good. Or, oh, and there were experiences where I think we would have a chime come in and we would be like, that feels too early for that shift to happen. And let's kind of, you know, modify the order. But honestly, it was a real, it's really disorienting and challenging to improvise with the chimes. It was way more difficult than I thought, because you're really even sustaining a note and then all of a sudden something else is coming in and it sounds like almost like what's happening, but then there's like maybe just one resonance that's like distinctly different. And anyway, it's hard to describe, but it was surprisingly difficult, but really fun too. So,
Yeah. Well, it sounds like the main thing that the 5 of you are doing during the course of this piece is not so much pounding drums or banging keyboards or blowing through a saxophone, but listening. That listening, you know, actively, not just like watching for cues, but listening in the moment to what each other person is doing. If you're not doing that, this falls apart really fast. I mean, you could say that about, I guess, any kind of music, but especially the way that this piece has been put together. Is that how it feels to you?
Yeah.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Relying on each other's instincts, taking some direction from Travis, but also like a collective experience, collective journey.
And I would say our rehearsal process was one in which, like, if we felt, you know, you can't control how, and nor do you want to, how people improvise or listen. But, you know, I think the rehearsal process was one in which we were trying to figure out how to listen to each other. And after those rehearsals, we would talk about, you know, things that we could do to, you know, communicate better or listen better. And that really was where the rehearsal came in, I feel like.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
To learn those.
Yeah, sorry.
Go ahead, Laura.
No, I was going to say, you know, and I can't help thinking there's something we've ended up saying a lot in this series and talking about different pieces is that when we hear recordings of the performance, how different that experience is than our memory from performing inside the piece. And I think this is actually the exact opposite. It's when I listen to the recording, it is, of course, the sound quality, you know, the production, it does enhance what the piece sounds like, but it really is my memory of the piece. It's something, a different experience. And I think that's really, really fantastic.
Yeah. I think it's a fantastic piece. And it's a terrific recording. Congratulations to all of you. And Travis, nice work.
Thanks, John. Thanks so much for doing this. And yeah, thank you so much for your devotion and your care to the music. I'm very grateful.
And Yarnwire creating a whole new repertoire of new music for 2 pianos and percussion, and now with saxophone.
Absolutely.
Right.
Inner Garden's the name of it, out now on New Amsterdam Records. Thank you all.
Thanks so much, John. Thanks,
Thank you, John.
Thanks, John.
Thanks everyone for being here.
Thank you.
We're going to go out with one last clip of Inner Garden from that third movement. But before we do, I just want to say thanks again to all you guys for joining us today. And for those of you who are watching and listening, please don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you feel like supporting this project, please head on over to patreon.com, and there's lots of stuff like download codes and all sorts of stuff to thank you for all of your support. Next Tuesday, December 1st, we are going to talk with Natasha Deals and Laura Cox about Natasha's piece, Panic Bread. And we have some surprises in there for you. All right. Thanks again, everyone. See you later.
Thank you.